Good morning. My name is Ann Kennard. I am an OBGYN and integrative medicine physician. I also was the yoga teacher for 2 of the sessions for the Mindful.org Healthcare Summit. And I have the pleasure to introduce the founders of Mindful Birthing. This is Nancy Bardacke and Eluned Gold. And I'm so honored to interview them today. I used Mindful Birthing when I had my own daughter 5 years ago. And as an integrative OBGYN, I've recommended their book and course, Mindful Birthing, to literally every pregnant patient that I've taken care of over the last 8 years. And so it is really an honor to spend some time with both of these women this morning. And I'm hoping you can both introduce yourselves and give us an intro to the Mindful Birthing course.
Sure. First of all, thank you, Anne, and it's an absolute delight to be here and to share a common interest, and some clicks with sometimes with this, and so it's thrilling. So as you said, my name is Nancy Bardacke, and I'm a nurse midwife, and with over 40 years of midwifery practice. And I have to say that birth was my first teacher, both personally and professionally. So I go way back, and began my own meditation practice also the same year that I went in, and I was helping families in a birth center in a hospital setting. And so that's about 40 years as well. And I kept seeing how the potential for bringing mindfulness and meditation practice could be useful, but I didn't know how to do it. And then in 1994, I met John Kabat-Zinn, and that was it. It was like, oh, okay, here's a form that I could bring these 2 things together. And I began teaching in the living room of my home because it was pretty far out of the box in 1998. There weren't many of us, and I live in Northern California, so I feel kind of lucky. I was in fertile ground, and somehow I got people to come to my living room, and the program grew from there till eventually I was invited to go over to UCSF, to the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine in 2007, and began a research clinical partnership with Dr. Larissa Duncan. I'll talk a little bit more about the research a little bit later. And so all in all, I taught 71 classes to a couple of thousand expectant parents. And it was mind-boggling. It was just, I was seeing things that I had never seen before in my career and work as a midwife, what was happening. And so with John's encouragement, then I wrote the book, Mindful Birthing, and on, and people started sort of seeing the possibilities and moving along. Ellen had joined what year was it? What year did we meet?
Oh, what year did we meet? Oh, I don't remember. It was at a conference in Seattle, wasn't it? But I
Yeah.
don't remember what year that was. I joined the foundation kind of more formally in 2017, I think. But yeah, but we'd already kind of got going by then. Yeah.
Right. We taught some retreats in France and some retreats here and initial things. And
Right.
so Eluned is the head of the training. So Eluned, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Nancy. And lovely to meet you, Anne. And I also, like Nancy, I'm delighted at this opportunity because it just feels to me like this work, well, my personal belief is this work, you know, comes into the category of completely obvious that it's needed. So every opportunity that we have to really explain it to people and to share our passion, I just really value so much. So thank you, everybody who's involved in creating this opportunity. So a little bit about me. I'm a psychotherapist. Yeah, probably 40 odd years now. A bit shocking to think that, but yeah. And primarily my work has been with families, very often families in distress. And I came across mindfulness 25 years ago, something like that. And a little bit like Nancy described, for me, it was just so clear that these two fields needed to come together. So I had already started working with mindfulness for families in various ways when I met Nancy, and that was kind of how we clicked, really. I was talking to her about work that I had done, that I was doing actually with foster parents, and how some of the foster parents were fostering pregnant teenagers, and then to bring mindfulness to pregnant teenagers. And then when the baby's born, you can just see the effect, even though there's a long history of trauma and distress in some of these youngsters, but nevertheless, the mindfulness gave them something. So that was kind of the story that got us together. And at the time, I was working at the Centre for Mindfulness Research and Practice at Bangor University, and I was the director of training there. So when I kind of, well, I was meant to retire, but actually I just stepped from that work into becoming director of training for the Mindful Birthing Foundation. So I'm not sure that I managed that transition into retirement, really. So that I've been working more closely with the foundation, and in that time, the training has grown hugely, which is, yeah, so exciting. And well, as ever, I'm learning so much from all the people that we work with. It's so exciting. I was just looking at the list. We wrote out a list because I can never remember it, but there's actually 25 countries represented amongst our trainees. So it's spreading, which is very exciting. So yeah, I've been involved primarily in training our MBCP teachers, and I'm also now more recently developing a mindful parenting course that we've called Mindfulness-Based Early Parenting. So it's for parents in that first year. So that's kind of where we're up to, I think. Do you want to say a bit about the foundation and how that was born and grew, Nancy?
Sure. The foundation was born in 2009, and it was just me and one other woman, Kimberly Streeter, who has been my doula for the whole time since Mindful Birthing was published. And with her guidance, we started training with, I think, 5 people in 2012 online. And it's grown from there to, as Ellen had said, now the training program is all over the world, and Mindful Birthing has been published in 7 different languages now. And So we're having a global presence, little by little, and it takes time and effort. And but having Eluned come on board when she did with her skills in training and her experience parenting, we're both grandmothers, we should say. I've got 5 grandkids, and
I've got 4 so far.
so far.
4 so far, but I have 4 children, so there's potential.
Right. And my oldest grandson is 16. So we've been through much about parenting. We're kind of, I guess we're in the grandma phase here.
Wonderful. Could you give an intro to the work of mindful birthing? The book, for those that are interested, is fantastic. I used it, like I said, with my own birth, and I found the concepts to be so foundationally helpful, no matter what kind of birth you have, or if it doesn't go to plan. When I went in for an unexpected C-section, the topics that I had practiced through the work of mindful birthing really helped my partner and I be calm and allow each moment to come and pass as it did. And I found that the concepts also were so helpful in the postpartum period and even through childhood. You know, my daughter's entering kindergarten, and I still use the tools that were developed in the work in my own life. And so I'd love for you to expand more on the concepts for our listeners.
Sure. Well, that's a great introduction, because what you're naming is what I was seeing. You know, I didn't know what it was going to be when I started teaching the mindfulness practices and adapting them to this particular time in the life cycle. And the responses of the parents were just well beyond anything I could have imagined. And I kept going, really? And related to the parenting, one of the things that I kept hearing was, he or she is such a good baby. And I was really curious about whether what we were seeing was because the parents were more present with their babies, that it was a reflection of them and how they were being, and less distressed, their perception of it, because they could cope better in the early times. And the other thing that you're talking about is, you know, this is not like usual childbirth education, because this takes a commitment. It's a 9-week course. And we ask people when they sign up to make the commitment to daily formal meditation practice, half-hour a day, 6 days a week. And with the various practices that we know are evidence-based, that help with stress and illness and pain and anxiety, depression, all those kinds of things. And, you know, for some people it's like, whoa. And for some people it said, sign me up yesterday. And so, but the benefits immediately in people's lives once they start doing a formal practice within a community of others who are going through this same profound transition in the life cycle. I mean, this is big. And so it's very nurturing and very fulfilling experience by and large. And then in the class itself, we teach the skills of exactly what you were talking about. How do you deal with the unexpected? And it's not about information. It's about, oh, really, all we know is right now. And just be in the moment and do what makes sense according to the causes and conditions that are happening in the very moments that you are living through, when it's like, huh, a C-section? Me? OBGYN? Where? Wait a minute, right? And so you had a way of working with the unexpected. And once people start practicing in daily life, what happens is it's like the confidence level that they can handle labor, particularly around pain, goes up, and the fear level goes down. Mm-hmm. And then you've got a healthier mind-body physiology for the pregnancy and for the actual physiology of birth and for whatever comes after, because, you know, you had pain from your surgery after, right? And so you had to work with that. So the whole thing. And then these skills transfer over, as you were saying, to parenting. And this is how we see that the potential for shifting intergenerational patterns right in the present moment is possible.
It's so powerful.
And it just makes so much sense to us. And it's like, but, you know, people have got to do the work. But Elena, do you want to fill in some of that?
Yeah, around the, I was just thinking while you were speaking, Nancy, about how just the stories that we keep hearing over and over again, you know, it's just very typical for me to hear stories about birth providers saying to these couples, how are you doing that? You know, when they're perhaps managing long, difficult labors. Or one couple that I recently taught, she was admitted to hospital at 31 weeks with preeclampsia. And they just turned their room into a retreat center, and they both practiced yoga and meditation. And she kept her blood pressure down for 3 weeks, which was quite astonishing. And she said all the staff just wanted to keep coming into their room because it was so calm in there. So, and this is not an untypical story. I mean, I think that particular couple, quite exceptional, but typically, you know, we're hearing these things about that birth providers are amazed at how well these couples are managing. Even when things are not going particularly well. And I think that really speaks to what Nancy was saying, is when we can separate out the fear and find ways to manage the fear through mindfulness practice skills, then it's possible to see much more clearly what's happening and actually make clearer and wiser decisions. And that environment that spreads throughout the whole team, I think, because we know fear breeds fear. No matter how professional we are or we would like to be, it can escalate when things get difficult. And when you have a couple who are able to really hear what you need to say to them as a birth provider, I think it makes a massive difference. So, you know, we really see that this has such an effect in the moment and long term through parenting and through relationships and, you know, into those early months of development. The neurophysiological development of babies, it has an impact on that. We don't know that yet, but we're secretly convinced. We have to do the research, that's all.
I think so too.
And research really takes a long time, and it takes money. And when you're doing something outside of the norm or the usual, there's a lot of, you know, standard way of thinking. You, I'm sure, understand that as an integrative medicine person. And but the researchers that more and more are teachers who are being trained are committed, and we do have some, you know, some research coming. One particular study as an example of what we found was done by, as I mentioned, Larissa Duncan at UMass, University of Wisconsin in Madison. And she and her colleagues did a study, and I participated. I taught the courses, where we had a randomized controlled trial. So a group took the 18-hour skills, mindfulness-based skills, and the other one did, you know, regular hospital classes, which are fine, but it's different. And the results were quite surprising. That the women reported a decreased depression symptoms immediately postpartum. And the impact lasted through the first 1 to 2 years of the baby's life postpartum. Now, that's pretty darn good. And this was in contrast to the ones who didn't take the MBCP course. They took regular community, good quality, you know, but no mindfulness education courses. And they experienced higher levels of depression symptoms than those without mindfulness skills. So that's just a small peek at what we're doing. But as I say, research takes time. We're in our infancy, and we're not waiting around because of with our own eyes and what is reported back to us. For those who want to do it, it's quite something.
Andy Weil has reminded me that the actual definition of anecdotal is unpublished in the original Latin.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's the same root word in Latin.
Why don't you say who Andy Weil is?
Yeah, so Andy Weil is, in my mind, probably one of the originators of integrative medicine, and really bringing together the best of both worlds: evidence-based nutrition, movement, supplements and botanicals, other healing systems with thousands of years of use, such as Ayurveda in India, traditional Chinese medicine, and using those techniques. Mind-body therapies is a big part of that, along with conventional medicine and surgery, to use all available healing modalities for the benefit of the patient. And I had the pleasure of being trained in the Andrew Weil Integrative Medicine Fellowship through the University of Arizona. And I know that your affiliation with the UCSF Osher Center for Integrative Medicine as well is closely tied. And so it's a pleasure to be able to, do what we do, but from the lens of a wider perspective.
Yeah.
And sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm just this kind of approach of how the mind impacts the body, and the more we learn and study, the studies particularly around mindfulness, we've got now 40 years of research that demonstrates the effectiveness of mindfulness practice. And of course, John has been pretty instrumental in that. That's now all over the world as well. So this is applying it to this particular time in the life cycle. And I love that anecdotalism.
Yeah, I think
encouraging.
and as we, when I was in residency, it wasn't that long ago, and it still had this feeling of once you delivered, you were sort of turned out into the world on your own. And it's been a newer concept, at least in OBGYN. I think that midwives have done a better job of this, but for this so-called fourth trimester, or the 3 months following the birth, and how do we provide better support for women throughout that time. And I loved and wanted to highlight again what you said, that the mindful birthing is really applicable to that time frame in terms of, I think it builds tremendous resiliency. The course that you've put together in Resilio, in Latin, to bounce back, and
right.
I wanted to talk about that too, just in terms of the healthcare workers for this year of the pandemic, because the skills that I learned through mindful birthing, they're not really about birthing, they're about developing resilience. And I found that it was a very, very prolonged labor, 2020, because we just didn't know, there was contractions over and over. Will the surge come? Will it not? What tier are we in? What does this mean? How long am I going to have to reuse this respirator? How this patient has COVID. How do I deal with the worry of what that means for me and my family? And the skills of taking things in the moment with the exercises that are presented through mindful birthing, I found profoundly helpful in the so-called contractions of working through the pandemic.
Well, that's deeply moving, because of course that's what one hopes. And we often say, and I think the title of this talk, the contractions of labor and the contractions of life, because contractions in life they don't start and end with the birth process. We can guarantee that there's going to be more, and nobody can predict the future. We can't know for sure what kind of birth experience we're going to have, or postpartum, or what might be with the baby. You can have the most perfect birth in the world. Everything you hope for in the bottom falls out. The baby has something, and or the breastfeeding doesn't go the way you planned. It's So being in the moment, which really is the only moment we have, which is easy to say, but when you're living it, as you're describing as a healthcare provider, it's like, oh, the mind, there it is worrying, am I going to take COVID home to my family? My goodness, you're human too. And of course, the stress for expectant families has considerably increased because the not knowing is already there, but not knowing whether your partner is even going to be able to be present, or how's this health of my baby. The stress level is considerably. And we know stress just ain't that healthy for expectant women. So here's a way to have some tools to work with that. Ellen, you talked some about the COVID, how that was.
Yeah, I was, but Nancy and I were talking before this talk, and I was saying what drew me to this work in the first place was just recognizing the experience of young couples, young families now is so different from when I was a young mum. The stress, just everyday stress that young couples are experiencing, it is huge compared to what I had to cope with, and that was even before COVID. So I was already thinking, these folks really need mindfulness. And that point that you just made about resilience is so pertinent, because I think some of what's happened more recently is that we've lost confidence in our intuition, in our own inner wisdom, and particularly parents. There's so much information out there, so much, do it this way, do it that way, be a good parent by spending X number of thousands of pounds or whatever, we all know about that. And to help couples just come back to, it's okay to listen to your own intuition. You know your baby best, and you can just see them relax into that. And of course, there's information that's needed and information to be gathered, but when you can come to that with much more discernment rather than the pressures of kind of stress and am I doing it right, when that can drop away, then you are in the position of making decisions which keep you connected, I think, to yourself, to your baby, to your partner, to the extended family, rather than the mind pulling us off into some fantasy world that the marketing world has devised for us. So that was really what drew me into this work in the first place. And as I said, that was even before COVID, and to see parents now managing not being able to have their parents visits, when the baby arrives. And it's really tough. It's been really tough this year for everybody, I think.
It has.
So bouncing is an amazing skill. I think we all need to get some bounce. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What I love about the work is it's not just a concept, it's actual tools to develop the neural skills to do so.
Yeah. That's just the other day we were talking, and often you've probably heard it, and new parents will say, okay, we put all this energy into preparing for the birth and all this classes and things and this and that. And then the birth is over and they hand us this baby. And it's like, we're going home. And how and who, what do we do now? And there's no manual on how to, except that what I'm hoping mindful birthing is filling in some of that is an inner parenting manual of, you just are going to be making it up moment by moment according to the situation, the needs of your particular baby, whether you're going to have one that sleeps a lot or one that doesn't, or, this is it. I mean, we spend as a society here more hours training our teenagers to drive a car than we do helping parents learn what a lot of research says we know, how to raise a human being, a healthy,
so true,
human being. And so hopefully these inner skills are a way, and it sounds like you've had some of that experience in your own life.
that is so true. Even after being an OB myself, when they handed me the baby, I thought, you're just going to let me take this home? That doesn't seem right. Thankfully, I had good family support too. Wondering if you can give an example of one of the techniques in the book.
There's so many. It's I can see what Nancy, she's having trouble choosing. Yeah. Perhaps I can jump in here while you're thinking, because one of the exercises that we use in the MBCP and also carries through into the parenting is the speaking and listening, which really helps cultivate trust and connection between the couple, pre-birth and after birth. And so there's a way, a technique that we teach of kind of mindfully speaking and mindfully listening. And we encourage people to talk about some fear and hope and what I might need in this situation. And these are often subjects which are not so easy to approach. So actually being given a structure to do that, couples find that enormously helpful. And I've just finished teaching a mindful, the MBEP, and actually in the evaluations that's come out as the most useful exercise that they learned before birth, and then we continue it on with some slightly different questions after the birth. So that for me is something very profound. And they're already saying, we should do this every week, or why don't we just take 5 minutes just when we go to bed at night? So they're recognizing the need to actually put aside time to have that connection, to have that communication. And I can only think that that's going to make a profound difference to the way that those parents manage difficult times, the contractions of relationship, for example. So that for me would be one of them. And Nancy, I don't know if you want to talk about the ice, or I don't know, there's lots.
Oh, there's so many. The mindful birthing is filled with them. And, I go, well, is it the mindfulness practices and just awareness of the breath, or how we're aware of the holding of the ice and the shifting from reacting to responding to intense physical sensations, understanding that it's the pain, quote unquote, of labor. It's intermittent. A lot of people don't even know that. And there are these wonderful spaces between the labor sensations that are quite peaceful and easeful and okay, and even joyful if you can stay in the moment. But when the mind is spinning out, oh my goodness, how much longer? What's the next contraction going to be like? How am I going to do it? Or the mind is in the past with that last contraction was so bad. I didn't do it very well. I don't like this. So when the mind is in the future and the past, you miss the present moment. You miss the time of calm and ease and ability to just be. And that just being sets up a healthier physiology for the labor process itself, because when the mind is spinning into past and future, it turns on the stress reaction and all the things that flow from that into a resulting birth process that may need more interventions and drugs and things. But it's important to state this is not about natural childbirth. From my point of view, every birth is natural. It's natural for a baby to grow in a mother's body. It's natural for the baby to come out, and it's natural for people to want to help and be of service in that time. And there's no one right way. It's too complicated. And everybody is doing the best they can, however they are. So
thank you. I just love that so much. I do a lot of high risk OB, and that feels so freeing. And I'm going to use that in my practice, that language. Thank you. And I wanted to also comment on what you were saying about finding those spaces in between the contractions as we look, to offering this mindful.org summit for healthcare workers. I think that's a very powerful concept, because I found through the pandemic that could be applied where, I didn't know what the next shift would bring or the different variables, but on a day off, I could still put my feet on the earth, and breathe good air and spend time with my family. And remembering to do that mindfully rather than, get caught up in the doom scrolling on the phone and the stats and the different surges somewhere else, that is a powerful reminder and skill, not only for labor, but for life.
Yep. Yeah, beautifully said. And for the healthcare providers, that kind of coming back to the present moment, when I would teach labor and delivery providers, I would say, as you put your hand on the door, let the touch of the doorknob be a signal to come back to the breath and ground to the feet, and forget the past and the phone calls and the prescriptions you need to write in it. And when you walk into that room, it's about presence, and be there for that particular situation that's going on, whatever it is, and work with it. And the patients feel that. Mm-hmm. They feel whether the provider is there or distracted. And that's where I think a lot of the satisfaction comes from this kind of work, is that connectedness. And we can get so caught up in our heads that we forget, and particularly when it's this kind of larger stressful situation like COVID.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you both can let the listeners know where to find your work.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Yeah. So pretty much all the information that you would need would be on the website, which is www.mindfulbirthing.org. So there you will find information about training. There you will find information, a lot of the practices that belong to the MBCP course, and some from the parenting course actually are all on that website. So if people just want to go and have a listen and a sample, they can do that. And if they want to find out more, we'd love to encourage people to come and train, because we think it's very profound for healthcare workers to do this training, to develop some of the perspective that you've just both been discussing here. Nancy's book you've mentioned several times. I should actually correct something that you said at the beginning. We didn't both write the book. It's Nancy's and Nancy's alone, so I can't take any credit for that. Other resources, I suppose what we're doing in the foundation is really wanting to grow a global community. So we're quite ambitious in that. So it's not just about practical things like training. We really want to encourage people to become part of this community globally. And we have a kind of a community of parents who've been through the course, but we also have a community of alumni who've completed our training, who communicate with one another and support, and exciting things are happening through that community as well, which is just very beautiful to observe. Are there other resources, Nancy, that people can find? I think the website is pretty much the go-to place, isn't it? And you can always just email us as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If there's any specific questions. We have an amazing team of admin staff who are just so dedicated and so helpful. So you can always get in touch with one of them. So yeah.
Thank you so much. It is truly my honor as a longtime fan of your work to meet you both in person via Zoom. And thank you for your time and presenting your work and these concepts to the healthcare workers for the Mindful.org Summit.
And thank you, Anne, for volunteering to take us on and not knowing what in the world we were going to do. But it's been a total joy, actually, to do this together. And I hope there will be more opportunities for us to connect and think more together about how we can serve expectant and young families at this transitional time in their life. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. And just let me wish everybody connected with the summit the very best of luck. And I hope it's an amazing event. It sounds it. So I think everybody's going to learn a lot and gain a lot and feel very connected, which was just be lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.